Vampires, alive among the lifeless, that make the night hideous with their inhuman cravings. If they are not destroyed in the flaming pits of hellfire, or staked to the ground in the light of the sun, will the unbelievable become real? A world of inanimate zombies by day, irresistible, horrifying attackers by night. Can a zombie woman's hunger for love repopulate the earth?
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I'm gonna kiss me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, doctor, help me.
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first.
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Welcome to the American International Podcast. I'm Jeff Markin.
And I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And on this episode, we will be discussing The Last Man on Earth from 1964.
The Last Man on Earth was directed by both Sidney Salkow for the English language version and Ubaldo B. Ragona. The screenplay is by Logan Swanson, a.k.a. Richard Matheson, and William F. Leicester. The Italian version was written by Furio M. Monetti and Ubaldo B. Ragona. It's based on the book I Am Legend by the aforementioned Richard Matheson, and it was produced by Robert L. Lippert.
The Last Man on Earth stars Vincent Price as Dr. Robert Morgan, Franca Bettoia as Ruth Collins, Emma Danieli as Virginia Morgan, Giacomo Rossi-Stuart as Ben Courtman, Umberto Rau as Dr. Mercer, Christi Courtland as Kathy Morgan, Tony Corevi as His Excellency the Governor, Hector Ribotta as the TV reporter, and uncredited but notable is Carolyn De Fonseca as the English-dubbed Ruth Collins.
And the movie opens up in a barren, desolate city. It's
obviously the United States.
It's obviously a European city. This looks like Chernobyl after the explosion.
There are bodies lying around, bodies everywhere.
There's lifeless apartment buildings, empty streets, abandoned cars. The sun's coming up. It's a brand new day.
The community church has a sign that says the end has come.
Yeah, it's not near anymore. It is actually come and gone.
Yards are overgrown, but probably not as much so as they should be.
Yeah, given the time frame. We go down a residential street and we look in the window where a man is lying in bed. Is he dead? No, he's only sleeping. He wakes up when his alarm goes off.
It's 6 a.m. and a voiceover says, "Another day to live through. Better get started."
Not in an enthusiastic way, though.
That's how I start every day.
So this is our protagonist, our hero, the titular last man on Earth. And he's going through the humdrum routine of his day-to-day life. And it's not really fun. He starts off by putting the coffee on, going to the calendar, marking off another day in his hand-drawn wall calendar. Since they don't make them anymore, he notes that it's been over 3 years since he inherited the world.
The voiceover says, "Is that how long it's been? Is that how long it's been since I inherited the world? Seems like 100 million.
So whatever happened to end this world happened in December of 1965, and now it's September of 1968. So he goes through his daily routine of checking the garlic garlands on the door. He goes into the garage where the generator's running and fills the tank. He opens the garage door, looks out on the driveway where a couple bodies are just laying there.
He goes back inside and notes that the garlic on the door is going bad.
Losing its aroma, its pungency.
And it'll have to be replaced. He's got a radio transmitter inside, so he turns that on, and this is part of his regular routine. He calls out and hears nothing but static.
He's on international frequency, KOKW, and he tries for literally a minute, and then he gives up.
Though it sounds like he might be picking up a transmission from Venus.
Yeah, if you cut our last episode. He goes to his front door. He has a mirror on the front door, and it's broken. He kind of flicks away the shards of that. notes that that's going to have to be replaced. He checks for more garlic in his pantry. There isn't any. He sees a couple dolls lying there, and that angers him, and he throws the coffee can that he's holding.
He picks up the doll, puts it down gingerly, then picks up the coffee can and just kind of lobs it. Every time he throws something, he's just like, eh.
Well, his heart isn't in anything anymore. Then he gets mad at himself for getting angry. It destroys his reason, and reason is the only advantage he has over his enemy.
And he says he has to find where they hide during the day so he could finish off every one of them.
He has a map on his wall. He's marking it off block by block, basically, for where he's been hunting. And then he starts to prepare his hunting tools.
He prepares some nice, fat, juicy steaks.
He has a lathe, and he turns long blocks of wood into steaks, suitable for stabbing.
Very fat steaks.
They have to be fat because they have to keep the wound open after he stakes. Obviously, vampires, after he stakes them, he can't remove them because otherwise they'd heal up and be able to hunt again.
Who said anything about vampires?
Well, what else do you stake, Jeff? You don't stake zombies, you shoot them in the head.
It's time for him to go to work, so he gathers up the dead bodies outside and throws them in the back of his car.
Oh, don't forget he has a satchel full of stakes, like dozens of them. So he's anticipating a heavy workload today.
As he gets in the car, he notes that he's almost out of gas. So that's one more thing to add to his already busy morning. As he's driving, he notes that there's several more bodies lying on the road, but they're going to have to wait until after he gets gas, because right now that's the first priority.
So he drives to a tanker truck. It's just kind of askew in the middle of the road. And we don't see it, but that's obviously how he gasses up.
He drives out to a pit, puts on a gas mask, and that's where he throws the bodies that he's been collecting.
Yeah, there's a still burning fire there. This burn pit has been going for over 3 years. We'll find out. He adds a little more fuel to the fire so it doesn't go out. And then it's on to his next errand.
Next stop is the supermarket.
It's abandoned. Obviously, everything's abandoned. He pushes in and basically goes straight to the still operational walk-in cooler. We see the engine roaring, so we know that everything in there is still cold as it was 3 years ago when everything stopped.
Yeah, before he heads in there, he does take us to the generator so we don't say, hey, why is there a working freezer?
There's meat hanging in there, and crucially, there's a big basket full of heads of garlic. And he takes, not all, he can't take them all because they might start to rot. He just takes as much as he needs for now. He can come back later for more.
He's got to make sure they last until he finishes his mission to get rid of these vampires.
Even after 3 years, going on 4 in a walk-in cooler, how is their garlic still usable? I mean, if I forget some in the back of the fridge, within 2 months, it's sprouted basically a whole new plant.
Well, it's frozen, so it would last a little bit longer. But yeah, 3 years might be pushing it. I'd just like to note how well-stocked this store is, because I personally have gone through a near-apocalyptic experience.
We all did.
And the stores weren't well-stocked.
No, within days, everything was gone. And here, there's canned goods lining the shelves, and the perishables are gone, but all the non-perishables are well-stocked. He didn't take them. No one took them. Maybe it just happened like that fast. There was no time to react.
So he's back on the road, and there are still more bodies lying on the road, but they're not going anywhere, so he can save those for later as well. He has another stop to make.
It's the mirror store. His mirrors are broken. The creatures that he's trying to scare off don't like to see their own reflection. So it's important to have mirrors anywhere they might try to congregate, I guess. So he goes into this store. It's full of elaborate, ornate mirrors, but he just grabs basic ones and, I don't know, maybe like a dozen or so.
He grabs about 7.
7? You counted? Okay.
I did count, yeah.
So
and he only gets rectangular ones. All the circular and ovular ones, he leaves.
Maybe they just hang better? I don't know.
They're probably easier to handle.
That could be. They're all one shape. That's probably easier on him. Well, now it's time to hunt. And we see a montage of him searching with his hand over his eyes, looking, where are they? Where are they? And finding various sleeping, not so sleepy vampires in their lairs and staking them through the heart. He takes a mallet. It's the end of the stake, and we don't see anything gruesome or gory, but he's obviously driving it into the chest of these vampires.
And he kind of lacklusterly pounds these stakes. It obviously doesn't take much to penetrate a vampire.
It's about as much effort as you would need to hammer in a tent stake. It's almost funny, though, the scene, we don't see very much. We see a couple of sleepy vampires being surprised, but then one of them just lets out a, ah, as it's being killed. And it's not supposed to be funny, but that did kind of make me laugh.
So after a long day of slaying, he has to return home, and he has to be sure to do so before it gets dark.
He does manage to get home just in time to restring that garlic and hang it up.
And hang the mirror on the door.
And he kind of battens down the hatches and prepares for a night of, well, whatever's going to happen next.
So he throws on some light jazz and waits for the sun to rise.
And once the sun goes down, the vampires come a-running. There's a cluster of them outside his door, sort of half-heartedly thwacking at his window boards. And there's one in particular with the power of speech.
He's very vocal. He goes, "Morgan, come out."
And he kind of slaps at his windows with a board and seems more invested in getting this one guy than the other ones do.
So Morgan lays down on his couch, trying to tune out the racket being made outside by these creatures and trying to tune into his smooth jazz.
Eventually he falls asleep, and then he wakes up the next morning with the record sort of scratching at the end of its groove there.
He seemingly awakes from a nightmare. We hear a voice saying, "Robert, I can't see."
We won't find out anything about that till later.
So it's morning, another day at the grind.
He has a new task today, though. He's going to make a trip to a cemetery. He drives out there and he goes into a mausoleum.
He lights some precariously balanced candles.
Yeah, on an altar inside this mausoleum. And he kind of drapes himself over a coffin. And this is where we see Vincent Price in his natural element here, talking to a dead wife in a coffin. I've seen this before.
We learn his wife's name was Verge.
It's Virginia, but he always called her Verge. And after he drapes himself over the coffin, he ends up falling asleep.
When he finally awakens, the sun's already set.
So that's not good. He goes outside the mausoleum. There's a few vampires sort of shuffling around half-heartedly. He pushes past them. But down by his car, there's another cluster of them.
He manages to fight them off and immediately heads for home.
He's driving very erratically, looking backwards more than forwards. So perhaps he fears he's being chased?
When he gets home, he finds his house surrounded by these vampires.
Yeah, but now he's on the outside, and he has to get through them to get in.
And the speaking one says, "It's Morgan. Get him."
The dub on this is so bad. The guy sounds like the robot from Lost in Space to me.
Morgan knocks over a few of them with his car.
And then he grabs one of those mirrors that he, I guess, left in his car. And he uses that to sort of ward them off enough so that he can get into his house. He barely makes it, though.
Yeah, he slams the door, and one of them has his arm in the door, but he manages to get it shut after slamming his arm in the door a couple of times. And now it's movie time.
He's watching home movies. The first scene we see is of a woman holding a very tiny baby, a newborn.
And then she's older, and we see her receiving a gift, and it's a doll. And the giver of this gift we recognize as the talkative vampire outside.
Right, so this person has a relationship with Morgan from the before times.
And next on this film is a birthday party, and then a circus.
Whoever's shooting this film is able to get both the angle of what's going on in this circus performance and also Virginia, Verge, and the little girl watching it.
Morgan starts to laugh, but it's not a laugh of amusement.
Yeah, he's cry laughing.
The laughter turns into tears. And all the while, those creatures outside are still banging at the door.
Now it's flashback time. It's the birthday party. The little girl, her name's Kathy.
Morgan is playing around with his movie camera.
And Verge is complaining about how she looks. She's afraid her hair and her makeup is a mess. And then Uncle Ben arrives.
This is Ben Courtman, who is recognizable as the vampire outside that keeps yelling at Morgan to come out.
Everyone's playing games. And then Ben shows Morgan a newspaper clipping and wants to know what he thinks about it.
The clipping says, "Plague claims hundreds. Is Europe's disease carried on the wind?"
Morgan kind of poo-poos this. He says he's a scientist. He needs proof, not newspaper media hype. And then Kathy comes up and asks to be entertained.
Yeah, apparently Ben has promised to do some card tricks, and Kathy is going to make him keep his promise.
So he runs off yelling,
"Card tricks, card tricks."
I didn't know if you were going to do it or I had to do it.
No, I'll do all of them.
Okay. Yeah, I can't get the intonation right. Verge has heard this, and she wants to know if it's true that this germ is airborne. And Morgan says it's possible, because anything is possible.
But he's not going to waste time worrying about something until it's proven.
Other scientists are working on it too, so why should he?
So now we cut to Kathy, the little girl's room, and she appears to be sick in bed.
They've tented her bed, which means they put a mosquito netting over it, and she seems to have some difficult labored breathing.
Morgan's in the room. He looks out the window and checks on her briefly, not too closely, and leaves the room, closing the door behind him, and goes to check on Verge.
She wakes and says that she's not sick, she can take care of things. But once Morgan leaves her alone, we see that she probably is not feeling great. She seems to be struggling.
Morgan goes back to check on Kathy, and this time Verge joins him.
And they have a consultation where they wonder, well, maybe we shouldn't send her to school. When we watched this, we both looked at each other like, you think? Why would you be going to school if you have to put a tent over your bed to sleep?
Morgan assures Verge that everything is fine and that they're doing all they can, and he's going to go to work.
He works at the Mercer Institute of Chemical Research, and they're studying the blood of victims.
And Ben Courtman works there too.
They look at some samples, note that the bone marrow cells are still multiplying. They're still living off one another.
They have not found a way to combat this disease. Everything they've tried has failed. Ben says that he's heard that some of the dead have been coming back, and this gets him a dirty look from Morgan.
Yeah, it sounds preposterous, but he notices that even some people who are still alive but infected are having difficulty being out during the daytime, and they seem really sluggish and slow when it's daytime.
He's also subscribing to the conspiracy theory that this is the reason the government is burning the bodies of the infected. Morgan says it's the best way to keep the germ from spreading, but Ben puts it out there that this could also keep them from coming back from the dead.
Morgan says these are stories, Ben, stories, and basically dismisses it the same way he's dismissed everything that's been put before him so far, and he's been wrong every time.
So that evening back at home, Morgan is watching the evening news when they announce that His Excellency, the Governor, is speaking from his executive mansion. Ooh.
I thought they were trying to play this off as being set in America, but we don't call anybody His Excellency here, so it's a dead giveaway that it's not.
And also the Governor has a rather strange accent, which you'd think they would be able to do something about since this is dubbed.
Right. It's vaguely European.
Anyway, he says that the state has been declared a disaster area. So we know we're in America.
Right. Because they don't have states anywhere else.
And also that public gatherings are forbidden.
So yes, this is starting to sound pretty familiar. One thing that is different here than our little COVID experience, the government has declared that should anyone die in your home, that you are to notify the health department immediately.
Because the body needs to be disposed of. Verge comes in and asks what's new, and Morgan says, nothing.
Yeah, he's determined to lie to her and to himself throughout the course of this plague.
And back in Kathy's room, she starts crying and saying that she can't see. And she's calling out to her mother,
who's sitting right next to her and not reaching out to her in any way. She's just weeping at the sadness of it all. But the little girl is pathetically raising her arms for human contact and receiving none.
Yes, she and Morgan have another consultation.
She wants to call a doctor, but Morgan says doctors can't help at this point. There's nothing they can do.
And apparently there's nothing the parents can do either because they're just standing by and watching this.
Ignoring her poor pathetic cries. Morgan says under no circumstances are you to call anyone or to let anybody in the house no matter what. And then he says, I'm off to work.
As Morgan leaves, he sees a neighbor lady crying while a body is being loaded into the back of a truck.
Yeah, this is obviously what he was afraid of and why he doesn't want Verge to call anyone should anything happen to Kathy.
And she's crying, let him be buried with me. For God's sake, don't take him away like this. And then the truck drives off, leaving her behind.
Yeah, it's like an army men. The body's wrapped up in a body bag. Driven away by military men. It's all kind of scary looking to me.
So Morgan gets in his car, and he's supposed to be carpooling with Ben, so he's headed over there to pick him up.
However, Ben is not going to work that day, or any day. He seems to be infected. He's very angry.
He has a mirror and garlic hanging on his door, but he says he's not going to work today or any day in the foreseeable future.
Morgan drives to work alone. There's no one on the road except for emergency vehicles and military trucks. So that's a terrible sign. But when he gets to the lab, Dr. Mercer is there.
Dr. Mercer is the only one there. Nobody else showed up for work today.
Mercer says there's nothing new to report, but they'll find an answer. Morgan says, are they going to find an answer before everyone in the world dies? Mercer says, no, we're still here, and that's evidence of there being a potential cure.
Morgan goes home that evening, and as he gets there, he finds a truck pulling out from in front of his house.
He rushes inside where Verge is sitting in a chair looking catatonic. He runs to Kathy's room. She's gone.
He goes back to Verge and asks when, and Verge explained that she called the doctor, that she couldn't stand just watching Kathy suffer.
She also wasn't going to be picking her up or anything.
That Kathy was reaching out, and then she was gone, and then they took her body.
Morgan finds out that truck he saw as he came inside his house had Kathy in it, so he gets back in his car and tears off after it. He drives to the burn pits. There's other people milling around there also looking for their loved ones unsuccessfully. And he starts interrogating different drivers. Did you just come from Market Street, where he lives? And basically nobody knows anything about Market Street.
He goes to the edge of the pit where a truck is being unloaded and bodies are being thrown into the pit. And some soldiers grab him. He insists that he's just looking for his daughter, but he gets the reply, "Mister, there are a lot of daughters in there, including my own."
I know, it's so sad.
He doesn't seem that brokenhearted about it, though.
Well, he seems sort of that grim, resigned state that you get to when everything is so awful, you can't even believe it.
So now it's morning. It's a very windy day.
It's always windy.
Morgan is making coffee. And a voice from the other room, Bob, I can't see."
Morgan rushes to Verge's room, but it's too late. She's dead, lying face down on the bed.
And he says, "No, I won't let them put you there, Verge. I promise. I won't let them put you there." So he bundles up her body and puts it in the car. Now, unlike the vampires he was gathering post-flashback, she gets to ride in the cab of the car instead of the trunk.
He drives her to a field and digs a hole and buries her in there. He goes back home, and while he's fixing himself a drink, he hears some whispering coming from outside the house.
"Let me in."
And he goes to the front door, and something is turning the knob. And he rather stupidly just opens it to see what's there.
And surprise, surprise, there's Verge.
Vampire Verge. She calls out, "Robert," as she reaches for him. And then the flashback ends, so we don't know what happens next.
The vampires are still banging around outside. We hear Ben Cortman, "Morgan, we're going to kill you, Morgan. Morgan, do you hear me? Morgan, Morgan, do you hear Morgan? Morgan, do you hear Morgan?" He's very repetitive.
He can't help but hear. It never stops with him.
But Morgan's had enough of this night, so he goes to bed.
Now remember, he wasn't able to put his car in the garage like he normally does because he got home so late. So when he goes out the next morning, he notices that it looks like it'd been through a chop shop. They took out the bench seating, they bashed in the windows, they've dismantled his car. It's completely undrivable now.
So now he needs to pick up a new car, so he's off to the dealership.
This is the fun part of the movie. Like, if you're the last person on Earth, everything is yours. Have whatever you want. He looks at some pretty nice-looking cars, but decides that a station wagon is more practical, so he drives a shiny new station wagon home and puts that in the garage.
When he gets home, he sees a dog, and it's alive.
He's surprised but delighted. He wants this dog, even though it's kind of a mangy-looking poodle. He tries to call to it, but it runs away. He tries to chase after it. It runs faster. He ends up running into town and looking around, and he doesn't see it.
This has pretty much taken over his day because finding this dog is more important than staking vampires. And while he's searching, he comes across a small cluster of bodies, and he notes that they've been staked, but with iron stakes. He uses wood, so this is not his handiwork.
This is someone else. There's another person alive in the world. And that's even more exciting than the dog.
So Morgan has a lot of questions. How can someone else be alive? Where are they? Why hasn't he seen them? He goes back to try his radio, KOKW calling, but there is still no response.
However, perhaps the signal was the kind that only dogs can hear, because the dog is back. It's right outside his house. He goes outside, collects it, and brings it in, and notes that it's bleeding.
He patches up the dog, and as night falls, the vampires return, and their knocking upsets the dog.
It's spooked into running and hiding. Morgan goes and sits with it, just to comfort it, and himself probably.
The dog is still bleeding, so Morgan decides to check the dog's blood. And unfortunately, the dog has the disease.
And this makes Morgan laugh again, but not a happy laugh. He wonders what's the use. And the next thing we see is him burying the dog. I guess he would have had to kill it.
Well, there's still a stake coming from the blanket that...
Oh, I didn't see that. So he staked the dog and buried it. While he's out burying the dog, he sees another daywalker. He throws down his shovel and gives chase.
Yeah, when she sees him, she turns and runs. And he shouts out, "Wait, I'm not going to hurt you. Can't you understand? Wait!"
And pursues even harder. So obviously she has legitimate reason to be afraid. She does not stop and wait for him, but he catches her anyways.
He catches up to her and grabs her and says that he wouldn't be out in the sunlight if he were one of them. And he says she has two choices. She could either come with him or face them. So he either convinced her or forced her to come home with him.
Well, he walks away and she does follow. So it's not like he's physically coercing her, but yeah, you're right. She doesn't really have a lot of options. They end up back at Morgan's place. She's tidying up. She finds one of Verge's sweaters in one of the bedrooms and puts it on in place of her dirty old shirt.
He's making coffee and she's checking out her reflection in the mirror.
She doesn't seem to like what she sees.
Oh, her hair's kind of a mess.
He offers her some coffee and she accepts. And they have a little bit of chit-chat. She says her name is Ruth Collins. She lost her husband and asks Morgan if he was married, if he had any children.
And then he suddenly gets suspicious.
He runs to the kitchen and grabs his handy garlic garland and brings it out and shoves it in her face. And naturally, she's repulsed by this, but she takes it as a sign that she's a vampire.
She says she's just allergic to garlic.
And that she's been unable to eat and just basically sick. And anybody would get sick if they hadn't been eating regularly, and then you just shove an armload of garlic in their face. And now she wants to leave, but he won't let her.
He won't let her because it's nightfall. She's free to go in the morning, but right now it's just not safe to go.
He wants to give her a blood test, but she refuses. He offers her some dinner, and she does seem hungry for something, but not food. Now the vampires are outside. Morgan's having dinner, but Ruth can't eat anything. She does have a cigarette, though. Morgan tells her that the vampires are mentally and physically weak, and that's why he's not afraid of them anymore. He tells her about Ben, who was like a brother to him, and Ben obviously is outside yelling to them.
He also says he has a theory that he's immune to this disease because he had been bitten by a bat in Panama. He believes that this bat had been previously infected with the vampire germ, thereby making Morgan immune to the disease. And he has a theory that he could stop the disease from spreading if he had the proper equipment and time. But at this point, stopping the disease seems pretty pointless because, as far as he knows, he and Ruth are the only ones left.
Ruth goes to another room, and Morgan goes to check on her and catches her trying to inject herself with something. He slaps it away, and it rolls across the floor. She tells them this injection helps her stay, just to paraphrase, on the human side of things. She says it's a combination of defibrinated blood and the vaccine. It keeps the germ from multiplying. And she's with a group that uses a solution to stay alive, such as it is.
And that they've been using this solution for quite some time. And Morgan is shocked to hear her use the word we.
And he wants to know more. And now it comes out that this was not a chance encounter. Ruth was assigned to keep an eye on him, infiltrate his, I guess, home lab and see what he knows, if he knew anything that could help them.
But it turns out that he knows less than they did. It's not just a reconnaissance mission because they plan on coming to him and killing him.
Her group wants to reorganize society. They want to get rid of the actual vampire dead, but also Morgan because he's been killing them. So both are a threat to their group.
Yeah, it turns out that many of the so-called vampires that Morgan has been slaying by day were these infected people
who are not undead, but actually alive. Morgan's shocked. He had no idea, and he is sorry that he killed these people. Ruth says that another part of her mission was to keep him there at his house because her group is coming to take him out.
And he says, your new society sounds charming.
She says that new societies often are. They have to go through a bit of a mess to get to a nice place. Ruth pulls out a gun. She's keeping Morgan at gunpoint. And Morgan says, why don't you just use it on me then?
Now that Morgan knows everything and he's obviously not leaving until daylight, there's no reason to keep him at gunpoint. So she puts down the gun and she kind of goes to sleep.
I said she collapsed. She seemed very weak. She's obviously not eating anything.
He picks up the gun and goes to get a steak. We dissolve to find Morgan had jerry-rigged an IV and is diffusing something into Ruth's blood. She awakens and asks what he's doing, and he says it's already done.
He brings out a mirror and shows her that she can look at her own reflection now.
The antibodies in Morgan's blood have cured her, and now he can save the others, and mankind can continue to exist.
He even shoves the garlic back in her face again, and it doesn't have the same effect anymore.
No, she inhales deeply.
But now she wants to go again, this time to warn her group that they shouldn't kill Morgan.
Because they're on their way there now, and they're going to have one thing on their mind, and that's destroying Morgan. And there won't be any way to reason with them once they get there.
He's not going to let her outside, though, because it's still too dangerous.
You have to wait until morning. Outside, Ben Courtland figures out how to shatter the mirror on the door.
And he breaks in and grabs Ruth.
Robert comes back into the room and finds that Ruth is gone. He goes outside, and she's right there, being attacked by Ben. Morgan throws Ben off her, as truckloads of people arrive.
And they have guns.
And they immediately go on the attack. They're staking all the vampires in the yard, using their iron stakes.
Somehow in this residential neighborhood, though, Courtman has managed to get on top of a building, and they shoot him and he falls off.
Ruth tells Morgan to run, and this group sees Morgan, and they start to give chase.
Yeah, now they're in a city of some kind. There's a building. He goes in. He has that gun that Ruth had, and he's shooting at his pursuers, but he can't get all of them. However, he does find a room labeled Armory, and he goes in there and starts loading his bag with little bombs.
With small explosives.
Yeah, but they're just smoke bombs.
So as he's running, he now stops occasionally to drop a smoke bomb behind him.
Which slows them down a little bit.
Well, he throws them more at himself than at them.
Well, no, they're behind him. And he manages to find sanctuary inside a church. It looks like he's been shot, though.
Yeah, he gets shot just as he gets into the church. Just before he goes in.
He tries to hide inside the church, but they find him. These people chasing him aren't just men. There's women. There's a woman with a baby. So it's the whole society after him.
The women and children seem to be unarmed. They're just in the nave. But the men with their guns are coming in from the sides. But Morgan's surrounded.
He's on the altar. He looks at all the people after him. He calls them all freaks and mutations.
One of the men throws an iron stake at Morgan, and it strikes true straight into his chest. And he shouts out again, "You're freaks! I'm a man, the last man!" Ruth runs up to him. "Robert!" And he says, as he's dying, "They were afraid of me. They were afraid of me. They were afraid of me."
Does he mean they were afraid of me?
I took that as what he meant. He
But
said
I mean,
it 3
like
times.
the emphasis on me?
That's not how he said it.
Oh, okay.
I think he should have. I think it would have been a better line reading.
Oh, okay. Ruth says they didn't know. And on her way out of the church, she tells a crying baby, "Don't cry. We're all safe now." And the end. That's it.
Welcome back to the American International Podcast, where we're talking about The Last Man on Earth from 1964.
As we said before, this is based on the Richard Matheson novel I Am Legend, which has been made into numerous films, but this was the first one. It originally was intended to be a Hammer film. Producer Anthony Hines purchased the right to the novel for Hammer, and Matheson wrote a script, and Hammer announced in 1958 that they would make it, but British censors would not allow the film to be produced, so Hines resold the script to Robert Lippert.
Lippert had wanted to make a Last Man on Earth type film for a while. In the late 1950s, Charles Marquis Warren and Robert Stabler optioned a novel by science fiction writer George R. Stewart called Earth Abides. Harold Spalding, who worked for Lippert, said the release of The World, the Flesh, and the Devil in 1959 killed off plans for that project. Spalding then read Matheson's novel and suggested Lippert film that book instead, and the project was then announced in August of 1962.
Matheson wrote the screenplay, as we said before, but he was dissatisfied with the result and chose to be credited as Logan Swanson. And William Leicester, Furio, Monetti, and Ubaldo Ragona finished the script that he had started. One thing that Matheson was dissatisfied by was a change in directors. He was originally told that Fritz Lang was going to direct the film, and he thought that would be, quote, wonderful. But eventually it went to Sidney Salkow.
Which is an understandable disappointment.
Yeah, Matheson made the comment, well, there's a bit of a drop. The original story was set in America, Los Angeles to be specific. But to save money, it was filmed in Italy. And the cast and crew was mainly Italian, thus the dubbing for the English language version. Though Matheson thought this film was the most faithful adaptation of his book, he called the result inept, and later said that he thought Harrison Ford as star and George Miller as director would have been the ideal creative combination.
But I don't know how that would have worked in 1964.
How old was he then? But perhaps later.
To more accurately show how grueling it was for his character to survive, Vincent Price insisted on lifting real people into the back of his car instead of dummies. This is why it seems he's taking extra care with the bodies. For the scenes at the pit, however, he's handling dummies for obvious reasons.
This film was released on a double bill with The Unearthly Stranger, with the tagline, "How much horror can you face?" Although sometimes, in some areas, this movie appeared on a double bill with a reissue of Circus of Horrors. And Fox Films handled the foreign distribution while AIP handled it domestically.
At some point in the 1980s, The Last Man on Earth entered the public domain. MGM Home Video, the current owners of most of the AIP film catalog, released a digitally remastered widescreen version of the film on DVD as part of its Midnight Movies collection in September 2005.
The film was not considered a success on its release, and not just by Matheson, but later on it did gain a more favorable reputation as a classic of the genre. Phil Hall of Film Threat called The Last Man on Earth the best Vincent Price movie ever made.
Among the less favorable reviews, Steve Podrosky of Cinefantastique felt the film was hampered by an obviously low budget and some poorly recorded post-production dubbing that creates an amateurish feel, undermining the power of its story. While Jonathan Rosenbaum of the Chicago Reader remarked, some would consider this version better than the 1971 remake with Charlton Heston, The Omega Man. But that isn't much of an achievement.
Price himself claimed that he had a certain fondness for the film, and he also thought it was better than The Omega Man. Matheson said, "I was disappointed in the film, even though they more or less followed my story. I think Vincent Price, whom I love in every one of his pictures that I wrote, was miscast. I also felt the direction was kind of poor. I just didn't care for it."
The Last Man on Earth has been established by many reviewers, including director George A. Romero himself, as a graphic blueprint for Night of the Living Dead.
Last Man on Earth is not the only adaptation of I Am Legend. There was a Spanish short called Soy Leyenda from 1967, obviously The Omega Man in 71, I Am Omega, a 2006 video, and of course the Will Smith vehicle I Am Legend, 2007.
You want to say that 2006 was from The Asylum?
Oh, no, I don't want to say that. But I guess I Am Omega from 2006 was from The Asylum. Now I have to watch that. Of our cast, outside of Vincent Price, not many appeared in future AIP films.
Not many people appeared in this film.
True. Obviously, Vincent Price was in numerous AIP films, The House of Usher and the other post-cycle films. He had a little cameo in Beach Party. And of course, he was in The Abominable Dr. Phibes and its sequel, amongst many others. Then we have Franca Bettoia, who played Ruth Collins. She was in Attack of the Normans in 1962. Emma Danieli appeared in Guns of the Black Witch in 1961. Giacomo Rossi-Stuart was in Kill Baby Kill, 1966, which is not an AIP movie, but notable because it was directed by Mario Bava. And Umberto Rau was in Madigan's Million from 1968, which was released through the AIP subsidiary Transamerican.
The Last Man on Earth has several variations from the novel upon which it was based. In the novel, the protagonist is named Robert Neville and not Robert Morgan, and his profession is changed from a plant worker to a scientist.
In the novel, the vampires are agile and fast and capable of running and climbing, whereas in the movie, they're zombie-like, slow, sluggish, easily overpowered. And the dog that shows up on Neville's doorstep in the novel is timid and comes and goes as it pleases. In contrast to the dog in the film, it doesn't get adopted like Morgan did with the poodle that he found.
The relationship between Morgan and Ruth differs slightly in the novel. In the novel, no transfusion takes place, and a cure seems implausible, even as Neville hopes he will find one, and Ruth escapes after Neville discovers that she is infected. And in the novel, the character of Neville is not captured until many months later, and even then he barely fights back.
The novel ends shortly before Neville is to be executed. Ruth returns to give him suicide pills and finds it ironic that he has become as much of a legend to the new society as vampires once were to Neville's world, hence the title I Am Legend.
So Cheryl, using our AIP scale, where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic, how would you rate The Last Man on Earth?
This is a tough one because it's a good story. It comes from an impeccable source. Richard Matheson is a great writer. Not going to dispute that. However, the story is executed in a way that is not great to watch. It's the combination of the bleak setting, it's black and white movie, everything is so dreary. Vincent Price is not very Vincent Price in this movie. He's so downtrodden and weary and resigned to his fate. And obviously that fits the story, but that's just not very Vincent Price of him. So I think perhaps he was miscast in this. And the dubbing is terrible. And the way the vampires just sort of amble about, it doesn't make them a very credible threat. I feel like anybody could just push past them. It wouldn't take more than just a couple of shoves to get away from them. So the whole thing feels just like a great idea that really didn't come together to me. Obviously, I don't dislike Vincent Price in any way. I mean, he's a great actor, and this film should have been just a slam dunk for him. And yet, I feel like he just might not be the right person for the role. So just with all those downsides, I guess I have to give it an I. It's almost there. It's just not quite for me. What do you think, Jeff?
Well, I would agree with just about everything you said. However, those aren't things that I would hold against this film. I think it's very possible Vincent Price was miscast. I think another actor might have fit the part better, but I love watching Vincent Price in this movie. The first time I saw this movie was I bought it on a DVD twofer with The House on Haunted Hill. And I bought it primarily for that movie. But one day I just popped in The Last Man on Earth just to see what it was. And I really enjoyed it. I was familiar with Richard Matheson, of course, as the writer of several episodes of The Twilight Zone and Star Trek. But beyond watching it that first time, I didn't give a whole lot of thought to this movie beyond that. A few years later, I would finally read I Am Legend and was able to note some of the differences between the film that I had seen. And then after that, I would come across Omega Man, which was a huge disappointment to me. And eventually the 2007 version of I Am Legend, which again was a disappointment to me. And as you mentioned, the dubbing isn't great. The guy doing Ben Courtman's voice is very, very strange and monotonous. But that's part of what makes this movie enjoyable to me, because it's very quotable to go, "Morgan, come out, Morgan, card tricks."
You do always say that stuff.
And even Vincent Price's voice, it never seems to sync up with his lips, so it's a little distracting. But much of the voice is voiceover, so it's not as noticeable as it might be if this was a big dialogue movie. And as for the location, yeah, it's shot in Italy, and very notably not the United States. There are all these old buildings, and they're huge, and they look very out of place. And it's got a unique look to it. And I think that if there was anything going on pre-apocalyptic in this world, it would be a bigger distraction. But because these are just large, empty spaces for the most part, it kind of works within the context of the film. So despite those negative aspects, I really, really enjoy this movie. When I first heard that Richard Matheson was disappointed in this work, I was disappointed. And then I found out that Richard Matheson himself was Logan Swanson, and he wrote this. So I said to myself, well, you're partially to blame. And then I read further that he was not happy with Vincent Price's casting. And this does seem like a weird role for Vincent Price. It doesn't seem to fit in with a lot of his other oeuvre. And I wouldn't mind seeing another actor in this part. But we got Vincent Price, and he's just always fun to watch. So this movie gets an A for me. It may be my favorite Vincent Price film. And again, it's not typical of his work, but I think in a way that's why I find this so intriguing. When I was taking notes, I kept on writing Neville instead of Morgan, because I had a hard time making that delineation between Robert Neville and Robert Morgan, because in my mind, Robert Neville is the name of this character.
I didn't read the book, so I didn't have that problem.
So if I was going to change anything from that movie, I would change the character's name, but to have Bud Cortman going Neville wouldn't have the same effect. So again, I'm giving this film an A for awesome.
Well, you have a right to your opinion. I think the reason I didn't really buy Vincent Price as this character is that I'm used to him being so much more in control of the situation and not at the mercy of all the elements. So seeing him as so passive was just a little jarring for me. I'm used to him as the Dr. Phibes type where he makes stuff happen. And here he's just sort of lamely fighting back against forces beyond his control. And that just felt weird to me.
Well, as I said, this is not a typical Vincent Price role. And you're right.
Thank you. Well, and you can see beyond that, and I obviously could not.
So that about does it for this episode of the American International Podcast. Until next time, I'm Jeff Markin.
And I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in. Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.